The broader sense of the term.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of this year's meetings. We have a very distinguished list of speakers this afternoon. Not so many people in the audience as we would hope, but we would certainly encourage everyone in this audience to try and bring a friend to the next meeting. That's something that needs to be looked at. Our first speaker this afternoon is Al Barrett, who spoke to this group on a number of occasions. Al, like me, and indeed like Troy, is a South Londoner who's earned a certain reputation in various areas, one of which is as an independent researcher who has particularly specialised in exposing those who purport to expose the far right, namely Jerry Gabb and the Searchlight Gang, in which he's done some quite remarkable work. Al has many strings to his bow, one of which is an interest in financial reform. And this afternoon he's going to talk to us about wealth creation for the people rather than banksters. I will be interested to see audience reaction on this one, and it's certainly a controversial subject on which I know Al has done a lot of writing in the past, and we shall all look forward to hearing what he has to say. Al, as I say, has been a stalwart speaker for us, often struggling through considerable back pain problems that he suffers from to address an audience. And I'm sure none of us will mind if he feels the need to sit down at some stage in this talk rather than stand up. We welcome him yet again, and I hope you welcome him very warmly. Thank you.
Yes, unfortunately my back is playing up today. But, good afternoon, everyone. The subject of this dissertation is, as Adrian says, the financial system. Not the way it is, but the way I envisage it could be. Herein I will go beyond the usual ranks against the usually. I propose something that's both startlingly original, yet by the same token startlingly obvious, yet strangely no one else on this planet appears to have considered it before. So therefore, like Socrates, I'm in the class by myself. I hope that after I've explained it, though, you'll at least have some sympathy with it. As we all know, there is a big difference between money and real wealth. Wealth is created by human action. True, the best things in life are free. That's until the Tories figure out a way to bring in the sunshine tax. And even in this day and age, it's possible, for example, to forage for food. But in practice, if you or I want something, we have either to create it ourselves, in whole or in part, or obtain it from someone else who's done the same thing. Even if the object of our desire, be it a tin of fruit or a new car or whatever, comes to us fourth, fifth or nth times removed, it has to be built, manufactured, grown by someone else. Usually to obtain such goods and services we part with money. And generally we obtain the money by parting with something else. That is, we sell something, perhaps our labour. But where does the money come from? Well, ultimately, that too was created, and broadly speaking, it's created by the government, by the banks. Generally, the government creates only a tiny percentage of the money supply, such a tiny percentage that is a truism. The financial system is what the great Major Douglas called the monopoly of credit. This is a legal monopoly. Indeed, as Sean Gabb, our keynote speaker, will tell you, if you buy him a drink at the bar later, a monopoly can be enforced only by law. In America, that power resides in the misnamed Federal Reserve System, the private cartel that is the de facto central bank of the United States. In Europe, including the UK, that monopoly is enforced by the Treaty of Maastricht. Although money is not true wealth, the possession of money gives us the power to own anything that is possible to own, and we could reasonably want. For this reason, the banksters protect their monopoly fiercely, and for the same reason, they are the de facto masters of us all. I don't think I need to explain in detail to such an enlightened audience how the banks create money, but I will give you the following example, again by courtesy of Major Douglas. I'll ask you to bear in mind that the figures I'm giving you are for illustrative purposes only, and the best part of a century old. A new bank is started, and 10 customers each deposit £100, making the bank £1,000 liabilities. These parties do business with each other mostly by cheque. After a while, customer number 10 decides he needs a £100 loan. He's a manufacturer, which is a big order, so he goes to see his bank manager. This guy is really sharp. He's actually run an engineering firm for the past 30 years. It's called Newland Engineering Limited. Newland Engineering. It's not a limited company, it's a private company. So he's the sole owner, and if he goes belly up, he loses everything. So he goes to his bank manager, and he says, oh, I've just got a big order from the Israeli government to supply them with generators for a new project in the occupied territories. And he shows them his letters of intent and everything, and the bank manager's very impressed, well, especially as Newland used to be an accountant. So he advances him a £100 loan, all he's got. And he says, right, give me the deeds to your house. Which Mr. Newland does. So he heads over to his house, and the bank manager says, right, you can have 100 quid at 2% interest. And he opens a loan account and he pays in £100. Just like that. Money hasn't come from anywhere else. He's created this money at the stroke of a pen. He's not taken a penny of it from existing customers, it's literally new money. So our manufacturer friend draws the entire amount, and the situation is now as follows. All 10 customers, including him, have £100 in their accounts, but he also has a debit of £100 in his own account. He's successful. The Israeli government doesn't default, and if it does, Washington will pay. He pays his staff, pays his mortgage, gives his wife housekeeping, sends his son to Switzerland for the school holidays, and he pays £102 into that account. £100 disappears, literally off the face of the earth. Every loan creates money, every repayment of the loan destroys it. And the £2 is the bank's profit. Now, he obtained all his money, including profits from other customers, but it's easy to see that every manufacturer and everyone else in the world obtains money by the same way. There's going to be a shortage. And this is where we are at the moment. The world is going progressively hot to the banking system. And this is why we have defaults, inflation, and even war. Unless the bank keeps the money flowing, the economy will collapse. This is one of my favourite quotes on this subject. It was directed at the Lloyd George government in 1921. Does he and do his colleagues realise that half a dozen men at the top of the 5 big banks could upset the whole fabric of government finance by refraining from renewing treasury bills? In order to obtain his money, the manufacturers invested his time and effort. And in this case, he put his own house on the line. His employees invested the time and effort as well, time and labour. So they deserve to be rewarded. Everybody in the firm, even the cleaning lady. Not everybody is producing directly, but everybody who is involved deserves a cut. What does the bank manager investor do? What does the bank? Absolutely nothing. Now, the bank has two, and only two, bona fide functions. There's what I call the strong-room function, and there's the bookkeeping function. Most of us keep some money at home, maybe a share certificate or two, and family silver. But by the same token, few of us would want to sleep with our life savings under a mattress. So we deposit in the bank. This is the strong-room function. The bookkeeping function is one we use every day. Now, again, I stress, if the manufacturer had not come up trumps, if instead of dealing with the Israeli government, he'd been dealing with, say, Griffin Farm Supplies in Wales, and supplied all the goods, and then his customer had gone bust, he'd lost everything. So the bookkeeping function we need, and the strong function. Now, one time we used cheques, we still do on occasion, but nowadays we all walk around with, I'm sure you've all got one of these, where it's, well, you've all got bank cards, I take it. What do we call them now? Debit cards, yeah. That is basically replacing a cheque. A debit card performs instant bookkeeping transactions, moving money from your account to shopkeepers and so on. Now, banks do other things as well as strong room and bookkeeping. They sell, that's actually mis-sell payment protection insurance. And they deal with foreign currency exchange. But basically, it's a service industry that contributes or should contribute to the wealth of the nation by holding onto your money for when you need it and saving you fiddling around doing your own bookkeeping. Yeah, they're not simply well rewarded, they're on the earth. Banking is an example of money for nothing. Your money for their nothing. Now I want to talk about the exact opposite, something for nothing. This is something we all get. I'm a child of the 70s, and that was a fantastic era, certainly for music. At one time I had a quite impressive collection of vinyl. I'm not quite the oldest man in the room, but anybody here not know what I mean by vinyl? At one time records were made on vinyl. One of the albums I bought at that time was the anonymous debut album by Boston. It was believed to have sold around 20 million copies. Prices vary, but in the 70s and 80s they used to pay £4, £5 an album. A double album will set you back maybe £8. From about 1967, The Summer of Love, which I wasn't quite old enough to enjoy, perhaps thankfully. From about 1967 to some of the early 90s, maybe a bit later, a lot of rock bands, singer-songwriters and musicians generally became wealthy men and women, some extremely so. They earned songwriter royalties, money on album sales, tours and spin-offs, merchandise, etc. I don't know how much Tom Schultz made from Boston, but it must have been a tidy sum. Bands still sell records to iTunes and such. But if you have an internet connection, I presume you've all got an internet connection, and you don't even need your own machine, you can use the library. But if you've got your own connection and your own machine, you can have all the music you ever dreamt of and then some, and it won't cost you a penny. Not everybody's happy with that state of affairs. It's not just music, film directors, boxing matches, you name it, it's all uploaded to YouTube and other video sites and a plethora of sites. Back in the 1990s, there was considerable media outrage generated at times on something called pirate software. And today you can download all the software you need, both free and legal. Anybody familiar with Mozilla? Yeah, Mozilla, it's a company that produces the Firefox browser. There's all sorts of companies which produce free software. And then you've got all sorts of friends, all free. But not everybody is happy with that, and there have been attempts to transfer the outrage of free software to film downloads and music. There was even a body called the Federation Against Copyright Theft, and such organisations peddled righteous indignation, all manner of ludicrous scare stories about pirated videos being used to fund organised crime and even terrorism. But the reality is that copyright is dead. Once something is uploaded to the internet, it can be copied ad infinitum for next to no cost. And because it can be, it will be. Now, this so-called problem extends to the written word. And this has led to a large number of local newspapers going to the wall in the UK and elsewhere. After all, why should people pay for news when they get it for free? This has led to the NUJ and other vested interests calling for newspapers to be subsidised. Sean Gabb will tell you what he thinks about subsidies. Again, if you buy them, drink at the bar. Some national newspapers have introduced paywalls with limited success. The big question is an alternative to chasing people and chasing organisations for royalties through the courts and governments, a finite sum, or taxpayer subsidies. Is there an alternative? There's a very simple alternative. Instead of allowing the banks to create money out of thin air and sell it to industry, the governments of the world should create this credit debt-free and pay it to the companies that control the internet. The massive ones, the big ones, and the not so big ones. Google, Yahoo, Facebook, your ISP, your host, and the larger websites. The world's largest website, anybody know what that is? It's the Internet Archive. It currently has over 390 billion web pages. that is a free site. Not for profit.
Can you say the name again, please?
Internet Archive. Archive.org. These corporations would take a percentage to reward them for their services to mankind. They would then distribute the rest to companies and individuals, copyright holders, performers, etc., for their service to mankind, perhaps on the basis of the number of downloads of page views. When I say copyright is dead, I don't mean that authors should not have the right to be recognised as the creators of their works. Of course they should. But by the same token, once something is uploaded to the internet, the creator of that work, all other interested parties should forget about copyright. But if 1 million or 10 million people download the next Harry Potter book, or whatever the governments in the world should create an equivalent amount of money by a process that to be determined and pay the author. I've given some thought to this, about the way it can be done. Certainly it would be best at a national level. There would be different payments for different types of downloads, and this would be limited to new works and to existing copyright holders. Let's take, for example, the book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This is said to have sold around 44 million copies. In order for the reader to enjoy this book, and we can say that Harry Potter novels are being enjoyed, mega. But in order for it to be enjoyed in the real world, it's written, you have an editor, there's a dust jacket design, advertising, and quite a number of trees will be chopped down, pulped into paper, and you have the physical process of printing it, binding, distributing to warehouses, then shops, and the money from the sales flows back the other way. This is a complex process, and think of those trees. I don't know how many trees it would take to print 44 million copies of a book the size of Harry Potter novel, but it's a small forest. This generates a lot of work on the way. You can imagine the process repeated hundreds of thousands of times a year for other less popular books, from magazines and newspapers, etc. On the other hand, for a book to be published solely online, all that's needed is for the author and perhaps an editor. It's uploaded to a website and anyone in the world can download it. You have the same creation of wealth. Exactly the same. If you want to know how to go about doing that again, ask Troy Gabb. The end result, somebody reads a book. Somebody uploads an album. And you play it. It's the same thing. The end result, but without all the hassle. Whether or not it's a physical medium or no physical medium, you read it, or you watch it, or you listen to it. There's the same net increase of wealth. In fact, when it comes to music, there's a greater increase of wealth because it's free. People download more, inevitably. The cost of distributing a book, an album, a film, a newspaper online is not appreciably greater if it is watched by 100 people or 100 million. At one time there would be a problem with servers. Another 5 or 10 years, there's so much capacity that broadband is so fast now that is not there's no longer an issue. So how much should be paid out to copyright holders and distributors? If it were £1 for a copy of Harry Potter size book, 50 pence for an album, say 2 pence for a newspaper, with YouTube taking half or part of the rest, that would reward both producers and pump money into the economy for it to be reinvested, and of course without any recourse to bank creator credit. The fine details need to be worked out by technicians and computers, but this is something that can be done relatively cheaply. Now this is one benefit. I would suggest there's another benefit. Anything uploaded and downloaded and paid for in this fashion would be a step towards destroying that perfidious institution, the New World Order. As I'm sure you all know, there are a number of organisations that regularly with the aim of controlling the world. I'm not talking about the Elders of Zion or the Order of the Illuminati, but the Council of Foreign Relations, which was founded in 1919. As people want to bring about a world super government, Professor Quigley identified this as the major player. But there are others. There's the Trilateral Commission founded in 1973, and the Bilderberg Group. When people like Dan Smoot and A.K. Chesterton founded the National Front, exposed these powerful elites back in the 1960s, they were given silent treatment, and when that didn't work, they were denounced as conspiracy cranks, right-wing coups and, would you believe it, anti-Semites. Now, the overwhelmingly left-wing alternative media has discovered these groups without acknowledging the groundwork done by these so-called right-wing coups, and even the BBC has reported on Bilderberg. The power elites consist broadly of four groups. We have the banks, their political dupes, stroke co-conspirators, their academic henchmen, and then you have the multinationals. And as always, it's those who pay the piper that calls the tune. Most extremists, it's people like us and the morons of the loony left, tend to view these power elites as one homogeneous entity. In particular, big corporations are viewed as evil, often simply because they're so huge. Even some mainstream politicians adhere to that view, and last year Margaret Hodge famously branded Google evil because it failed to pay its fair share of tax. And again, Sean Gabb will tell you what he thinks about tax and its fair share. I'll return to Google shortly, but I would like to dispel this myth about corporations being evil simply because they're big. Last year, the loonies of the Socialist Workers' Party railed in their weekly newspaper against the Tesco supermarket chain after it revealed that some 30,000 tonnes of food produced by the company in the first half of the year are being wasted. According to the comrades, the real problem is that supermarkets produce more than they need in the hope of undercutting competitors and scramble to sell as much as possible at a profit. If I may quote Major Douglas again, it has never been clear to me why any man in any position of life should be expected to perform any action whatever, which was not in some sense the word profitable to him, ditto supermarkets. Tesco made a group profit of £3.8 billion, a truly astronomical sum. But unlike the banks who can make that kind of money by simply writing figures in a book, every penny of that profit came from human effort. That 3.8 billion was pre-tax, so it's not quite so big. Now factor in the following. This was on sales of £72 billion, so it's quite a small percentage. Tesco employs staff in 14 countries. Anyone like to tell me, guess how many they employ? No? Around 500,000, over 500,000. So this parasitic entity provides livelihoods for over 500,000 people and provides us with cheap and nutritious food. The left view wasted food as a result of overproduction. The reality is that there's no overproduction under capitalism. What there is underconsumption, and that is due entirely to the financial system. Big companies need to make big profits, and massive corporations need to make massive profits. It's only by operating on such a colossal scale that supermarkets and similar corporations can deliver so much for so little. You simply cannot get the economies of scale otherwise. One final word about Tesco. As some of you may know, this institution was founded by Jack Cohen in 1924 on the principle of stack the iron, sell it cheap. So whatever the Jews have done in the Middle East since 1948, that's something we should thank them for. Now, evil Google. This company is actually one of the great benefactors of mankind in the 21st century. Consider all it currently offers us for free. Anybody got a blog? Yes? No? You can have a free blog with Google. You can have free email, 15 gigabytes of space to store documents, a road atlas, videos, search engine, knowledge at your fingerprints, translation. Google gives that to every citizen of Britain, to every citizen in the world for free, but Margaret Hodge isn't satisfied. She wants them to pay the British government for the privilege of doing so. So they can pay this money to the banks, pay the interest on the debt these same banks have conjured up in thin air. Incidentally, Google have attended the last 3 Bilderberg meetings, Tesco have not. Now, if we can persuade companies like Google to pressurise our governments and to take the power to create credit away from banks and give it to the real world creators, i.e. them, where would that leave us? Well, it would leave us with either no national debt or a very much reduced one. It would mean, too, an increase in real investment and stripping the power from the banks. Last month, the Bank of Scotland posted losses in excess of £8 billion. Losses. At the same time, set aside over £570 million of staff bonuses. That is one hell of a gravy train. No regular company could do that, be it a supermarket, technology giant, or anything else. This shows the immense power of the corrupt system usual. Once that power is gone, and the banks are reduced to strong room in bookkeeping, the whole edifice will collapse. Taxation, the draconian laws will go with it, the odious men and women enforce them, the lot. Investment banking, so called, is primarily about speculation, in other words, gambling. It makes money but has nothing of value. In fact, in the UK, a lot of this is to do with property speculation, and then you have all sorts of ludicrous financial instruments, derivatives, and futures. Some of these even sound dodgy. I mean, credit default swaps. Would you really want to buy a sort of product called a credit default swap? Seriously. So once that is abolished, once that nonsense is abolished, all this gambling, and the investment goes into real goods and services, including capital goods, we'll see a stabilising of prices, falling of prices, and real investment in the IT sector, especially, will have far-reaching ramifications that improve all our lives. It will lead to the development of machines that a short while ago sounded futuristic, but which are already being marketed now. Everybody here familiar with 3D printing? There was some controversy last year when someone in Texas produced a blueprint for a printed gun, one that works. That will create nightmares for law enforcement. One of the most fantastic future applications to 3D printing will be transplant surgery, the printing of human organs. And believe it or not, they expected to print the first such organ, the human liver, later this year. That will mean the end of transplant surgery as we know it. Our everyday lives will be affected in less sensational but more profound ways for us. 3D printing applied to electronics and eventually devices which are today still relatively expensive will be absurdly cheap. Imagine printing a mobile phone for £1 or two and other consumer goods. Imagine social ramifications that would have. Certain types of theft will disappear. Even the dumbest nitwit wouldn't mug a woman for a phone when you could print one for the price of a cup of coffee. I'll end by saying that thanks to the internet, millions of people across a broad political spectrum now realise what is wrong with the current financial system. 30, 20 or even 10 years ago, ideas that were regarded as cranky are now widely accepted. There is a downside to that, of course. We've now got an endless stream of idiots churning out all manner of conspiracy garbage, not to mention fantasies about patriarchy, black civilisations of the past, and white privilege. There's so much white privilege, why are we meeting here in this room? And then the latest form of racism, of course. But a growing number of people, including blacks, are beginning to realise that if not quite all the problems of the world can be traced to the financial system, then destroying rather than reforming it is the only way to build a better world. And the way to do that, in my humble opinion, is, as I said, to take the power to crack credit away from those who produce nothing and give it to the people who control the medium and now dominate and serve us all. The internet is a worldwide phenomenon, but unlike the banking system, which consolidates power, is the ability to diffuse power and finance, and thereby to hand back control to each and every one of us of our lives. Okay? Questions?
Any questions? I'll ask a question. Now, you talk about investment, which is good, and speculation, which is bad. Can you really draw this clear-cut distinction? For example, a farmer's got 10 acres of land, which he uses for growing turnips. But he thinks next year is going to be a great year for turnips. So he goes and plows and manures and seeds all 10 acres of land. Now usually he's only doing this for 8. He decides to bring in an extra 2 under cultivation because he thinks it's going to be a great year for turnips. Why isn't he speculating?
Well,
he's speculating on the turnip market.
There is a role for speculation, yeah. but let me put it this way. If I buy paint, if I pick up a painting in a junk shop and I'll put it on eBay.
You see the Fabergé egg that was bought for scrap?
Tell us.
Yeah, no, it was in Times yesterday. Somebody bought a Fabergé egg for £5,000 or £6,000 for its scrap value. Fortunately, discovered it was in fact a Fabergé egg before scrapping it. Yeah, that was involuntary speculation. Yeah.
But I mean, if I buy a painting for £10, put it on eBay.
Yeah.
Somebody buys it for £100. Somebody else buys it for £1,000. Then they discover it's a Rembrandt. The price keeps going up.
Yeah.
Eventually, at some point, somebody's going to either take the painting home or going to have to sell it for less than they pay for it. But it doesn't actually add any value to the economy. It may give the person who sells it more purchasing power, but it doesn't add any more value. When banks create money for speculation, a handful of financial parasites make money. But again, what about the farmer? If they invested in the farm equipment, 3D printed tractors, well, that's coming. You know, they're talking about printing houses with not buildings like this, obviously, but large machines, moulded, where you can affect where you can certainly as far as disasters and things go, where you can erect a house in a day or two.
Yeah. I think our ancestors have done that in 1945 with the hideous prefabs you see all over South London. Yes. Any more questions? Please.
So you're really talking about what amounts to the abuse of leverage, aren't you? By constantly issuing money, you get the money chasing assets, which builds up an asset bubble, effectively.
Yeah.
Which finally, when there are no more people coming into the market to buy, then that price, for whatever asset you're talking about, which is usually all assets across the board, and sometimes shifting from one to the other, but basically, if you can't find a good fool, then the price will then collapse because it's only going up because someone is buying today what they believe they can sell tomorrow at a profit. There's no intrinsic value there, there's no actual return in terms of, like the farmer, increased productivity. That's not occurring. All that's happening is money is chasing assets in an ever-increasing spiral until it comes to a natural end, which of course it must do at some time. Is that rough?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you create money for productive work, there's a big difference for just speculation. Massive difference.
By speculation, you mean buying today what you can sell tomorrow at a profit?
No, I mean, there's an element of speculation that entrepreneurs produce things, hoping to sell for a profit. Nothing wrong with profit, but just pumping money out into playing the stock market or playing with derivatives or pushing up property prices, it doesn't do any good at all. If you take this power away from the banks and give it to the people who produce things, what will they do?
So what are you saying, that you should suspend fractional reserve banking?
Well, I'm saying we should get rid of usury altogether, and that the money supply can be increased by paying directly to producers. Purchasing power belongs to producers, not to.
So are you saying the Treasury should issue money free of debt?
Well, yeah.
And how do they get that into the economy?
As I've said, the world. If you take the Harry Potter book, right? If you now 44 million copies of that book were published, how did that get to it? So it came out of the pockets of people who bought it. If you distribute 44 million copies over the internet, yeah, people read it. If you distribute 44 million copies an hour, people play the music. Don't the people who produce the goods or the music or whatever deserve to be rewarded?
Well, I don't really see how that gets money into the economy.
Well, of course it does. It pays to them.
It's just another way of doing things. But how does that affect the actual issuing of the money?
Because it's paid to them and not the banks.
By whom?
By the Treasury. It would require.
If Treasury issues money debt-free, you're saying?
Yeah, but we know that the bulk of money is created by the actual bank loans.
Well, yes, quite. So, I mean, okay, you want to put Google on the internet, or Harry Potter on the internet, you need...
Well, stuff is there already anyway, but people like
you need funds to do this.
Yeah.
So, the standard way is you go onto your bank and, you know, he gives you a rip-off
Doesn't
deal.
give you anything. He sells it to you.
What he does is put his hand in your pocket. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
But in theory, you go along to the bank and you get a loan, and then, you know, you go and do your business, and then you're paying back. That's the, you know, simple.
That's what they kid you, but of course it's not a loan, it's money that's created at interest.
Yes, all quite. And you pay interest on the money that's created out of thin air, essentially.
Yeah.
So where do I go then if the bank isn't there giving me this twisted deal? Do I go along to the Treasury?
Oh, if you want a bank loan, you would borrow real money from the bank.
When you say that,
well,
you mean from deposits?
yeah.
So that you are saying stopping fractional reserve banking?
I'm saying stopping usually per se, but there are other ways of raising money.
So you're saying that
I mean, if you want money, you don't have to go to the bank. There's peer-to-peer lending and things like that. There's crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding?
Yeah.
Well,
There are alternatives, whether they would in practice provide funds on the scale needed. Peer-to-peer lending is certainly growing. There are websites that specialise in it. It's a growth industry.
yes, it is.
I'm not saying we could abolish it overnight, but you know, if we could convince the big companies like Google that they're the ones who should be controlling the purse strings, well, they're actually producing, they're actually working for our benefit. The banks are.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that. The chief problem is the reversing from this situation is not possible really without a collapse, complete collapse. I mean, this is why we had our dear Prime Minister Gordon Brown more or less railroaded into giving our money to cover the losses of people who'd basically speculated at the top of the market, so that there wouldn't be a financial collapse. You know, or a deflationary depression.
Well, they kidded us all a bit collapse, but
well, it probably would have been a collapse of something. Probably the wealth of those who put their money into
Yeah.
assets at the top of the curve.
Yeah.
But the point is that so difficult has it become to unwind these positions once they're in place that you get rather foolish people like Gordon Brown are railroaded into that, and reversing from any situation that's in place, economic system that's in place, is I think it's a major part of the problem.
well, yeah, we've got to try. There was a way to give up, wasn't there? It's the alternative. But I mean, if you a rock group and you sell 1,000 or 1,000,000 copies an hour, you'd expect to be paid. If you put these on YouTube and it's downloaded for free, you'd expect to be paid. The thing is, it should be new money. As things are, it's chasing out. I mean, people do make money out of Google and things, out of AdSense and iTunes, but they're chasing the same dollar. We need a new dollar, a new debt-free dollar. But it's surprising nobody's actually seen this before, because the internet, as we know it, is mainstream economics doesn't take account of it. Look at post offices are collapsing. What you know, the price of sending letters gone up, and the post offices are being scrapped because who uses mail anymore? It's far more by email.
Internet companies delivering their goods.
Yeah, if you're the amount of money it sells. If you're sending out a sales, if in the old days, if you want to send out a sales catalogue to 10,000 customers, that's an enormous expense. Nowadays, you put up a website and send your customers a link, and it's all done for you. And economics doesn't recognise that. It's not taking into consideration that the amount of money that's being saved. And it should be new money that's created.
Right, well, if there are no more questions, we'll take a break. I think it's 1:45 by that clock. We'll resume at 2 o'clock. If all the light bulbs in this room haven't gone out by then, they're certainly compromising on Edison or Swansea mentioned here. My goodness. Yes, 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume at 2 o'clock.